This is the final video in the Excel 2013 Unit A, in which we're going to be looking on pages Excel 16 and 17, where we're going to be choosing different print options. Now, before printing a document or a worksheet, you may want to preview it or review it using the Page Layout tab to fine-tune your printed output. Now, you can use the tools on the Page Layout tab to adjust print orientation, which is the direction in which the contents print across the page, the paper size, and the locations of page breaks. You can also use the Scale to Fit options on the Page Layout tab to fit a large amount of data on a single page without making changes to individual margins, and to turn the grid lines and column row headings on or off. Now, when you are ready to print, you can set print options such as the number of copies to print and the correct printer. You can also preview your document in the Backstage view using the File tab. And you can also adjust page layout settings from within the Backstage view and immediately see the results in the document preview. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to click on cell A20. And once we have that, we want to type in your name. So I'll type in my name here. And then it tells us we want to click on our Enter button, and that's going to enter our name into cell A20. Then next, it tells us in step 2 that we want to click the Page Layout tab. And of course, this is the Page Layout ribbon that's on there. And of course, the solid outline indicates the default print area. And of course, that's just right here, and that's our print area that we have. In step 3, it tells us that now we want to click on our Orientation button in the Page Setup group. Once we have that, by default it's set up on Portrait, where it's going to be taller than what it is wide, but we want to click on Landscape. And of course, now you'll notice that the paper image has changed on the screen. And that means that the paper orientation has changed to landscape. So now the contents will print across the length of the page instead of across the width. Now, of course, you can use the zoom slider on the status bar at any time to enlarge your view of specific areas on your worksheet. In step 4, it tells us that we want to click on the Orientation button again and switch it back to Portrait. So we're going to click on Portrait. Now the orientation returns to Portrait, so the contents will print across the width of the page. In step 5, it tells us that we want to click the Grid Lines View checkbox in the Sheet Options group on the Page Layout tab. So if we go over here, here is our grid lines. And of course, if we click on the View checkbox, we notice that our grid lines on there, it has now disappeared. It has been hidden. Then of course, now if we click on the Print Grid Lines on there, that is going to allow us to print the grid lines. So let's go ahead and save our document here. And of course, printing the grid lines actually makes the data easier to read. But the grid lines will not print unless you click on that Print Grid Lines checkbox. And of course, we turned off the view so that we can see that there's no grid lines right now, but when we take a look at the file or the print preview, we're going to see that grid lines will appear. And to do that, we're going to click on the File tab, which is actually on step 6. We click on the File tab, and then we're going to click Print on the navigation bar. Now take a look over here, and this is the print preview. Now remember earlier it did not have grid lines on there because we hid them from our view. However, we clicked on the Print Grid Lines, which means that now if we would print it, this is what the document or this is what the spreadsheet would look like. And of course, the Print tab in the Backstage view displays a preview of this worksheet exactly as it will look when it's printed. Now, to the left of the worksheet preview, you can change the number of document settings and print options. Of course, to open up the Page Setup dialog box and adjust page layout options, you have to click the Page Setup link in the Settings section, which that is down here at the very bottom. So there's the Page Setup section. And of course, you want to make sure that you compare your document to this right here. Now, of course, now you can print by hitting the Print button up here to print to your correct printer with the correct number of copies. And of course, here's where you can set some other settings. You can, of course, print only the active sheets. You can tell what pages you want to print to, if you want it one-sided or multiple-sided, if you want it collated, if you want a landscape or portrait, and there's where you can change your paper size. Here's where you can change your margin, and here's where you can actually change your scaling on there. And of course, that is kind of the fit to. So we can fit it to one page, we can fit all the columns on one page, or we can fit all the rows on one page. But we want to leave all those options as they are by default on there. Now, of course, we're not going to have you print this document, but just to print it, you would click on this print button here, and it would send your spreadsheet to the printer. Now, of course, once you're finished here, you can always click on this back button, and that will take you back to the main part of Excel so you can work on your worksheet. Now, of course, in addition, remember we said that we can click on the page setup button, and of course that brings up the page setup dialog box, and this is where you can alter the page, whether it's portrait, landscape, the scaling in a different way than other than these buttons that's over here, the paper size, the print quality, the margins, headers and footers, and also some sheet information as well. Now that concludes this file, so just go ahead and make sure that you save your document, and you want to make sure that you upload this document into CoreSites. Now, of course, you can also change the active printer, and of course that's one thing you might want to do as well at times. So if you're in the print area here in the backstage view, you can change the active printer by just clicking right here where it says printer, and you can see that there's different printers that are available. Of course, you want to make sure that you print to the proper one in which you're going to be getting your print document from. Now also, you may have a quick print button if you put it into the quick access toolbar. So I could put the quick print button here, and what that button actually does is that when you press that, you can actually print your worksheet using the default settings just by clicking it, so you don't have to go through and hit the file and go to print. Now, of course, sometimes you may need to keep a record of the formulas that you used in a worksheet, because right now if we take a look at this, all we do see is numbers. We don't see the formulas. And of course, you might want to do this to see exactly how you came up with a complex calculation so that you can explain it to others. Now, to prepare a worksheet to show formulas rather than results when you print it, of course, you open the workbook containing the formulas you want to print. Then next, you click on the Formulas tab, and then you click on the Show Formulas button in the Formulas Auditing group to select it. So here's the Formula Auditing group, and if we click on Show Formulas, you'll now notice that this takes a completely different look, and instead of having all the numbers, here's the numbers that we just typed in, and that those are just numbers, but everything else is the formulas and functions that we use on there. Now, of course, when the Show Formulas button is selected, the formulas, rather than the values that are displayed in them, is going to print instead of just the values. And of course, this Show Formulas button is what we call a toggle switch. So if you click on the Show Formulas button again, you'll notice that the values reappear. Now, of course, we also mentioned earlier about the scaling to fit. And of course, if we would take a look at the page setup dialog box here, we can get to that by clicking on the launcher on the page setup group in the page layout tab. Now, this is where if you have a large amount of data that you want to fit on a single sheet of paper, but you don't want to spend a whole lot of time trying to adjust the margins and other settings so that it all fits. Now, you can easily print your work on a single sheet by clicking the No Scaling List arrow in the Settings section on the Print button in the Backstage view, which we seen a minute ago, or you can click on the Scaling area here. Now, by default, it's going to be 100% of its normal size. But here we can also have it fit to a certain number of pages wide by a certain number of pages tall. And we can make those adjustments here. So we can do it by percentage, or we can do it by how many pages we really want this to print on. So those are some options on there as well if you're wanting to make a document fit or a worksheet fit onto one page. And that concludes the information for Excel Unit A. You're ready to move on to the assignments on there, so make sure that you do submit your work into CoreSites for the walkthrough. and go ahead and start working on your additional assignments as detailed out on the announcements page on course sites.